members out there, they are concerned. Yeah, the challenge we have is that much of the small and medium enterprises, they are still failing to comply with the national minimum wage due to the fact that their tendering process, they tender at their lower bind while they cannot able to comply with the national minimum wage. But there are some who they tender at their lower bind, but they get adjustment, but they still do not want to comply with the national minimum wage. Regardless much of the client, they pay them even the back payment, but still, because it was a norm in the security sector. Since in security sector we have, firstly we were having a collective agreement, which much of the companies they were not complying with. Same applies to the national minimum wage, which is currently now being gazetted. Still, these same employers, they are failing to comply. There are those who are complying and there are those who are not complying. Those who are not complying, some of them is not merely because they are not able to pay. Right. Some of them is just the ignorance of the law. Yes.
Now, are there any patterns or trends that you've noticed in terms of which companies are more likely to disregard the minimum wage laws, and how does this actually affect security personnel at the end of the day?
Yeah. We understand that because much of the companies, especially those who are having government tender and parastatal, those clients, they are complying, paying, or they adjust the minimum wage to these specific companies. But the same companies, when they are being paid or when they adjust their invoice, they are not paying the security card. The trend here is the ignorance and lack of regulation of the security sector, which means that in security sector we need a political will. Means that employers, they are doing muchly the way they want because there's no touchable action which normally used to be taken against this non-compliance. That's why now what we did as of this January 2025, we try to engage much of the employer and their client. But we are seeing that some of the clients, they paid even the back payment, they adjust the wage of the security guard, but the company, they are not paying the national minimum wage, or they are not complying with the national minimum wage. Some of them, they are even opted to give a fixed salary to the employees and let the employee to work more days. And some, what they did, they reduced the number of days and they give less, which means employees literally they get no increment as we are speaking. It's only the few who got this. This trend come from, as I said before, is that they were having those collective agreement for those years which we were using, and the Minister of Labor, they were stuck a bit by enforcing the compliance with those companies who are not complying. That's why now the same trend go along again with the national minimum wage, the current phase in now, which we are talking about, saying much of the company, they are not just complying.
Now, Mr. Franz, given the situation that you've just explained, how does non-compliance with minimum wage laws affect, the livelihoods of security workers in Namibia?
Yeah. What we are saying is that, as I said earlier, is that security sector need a political will, the lack of regulation in terms of the law. Because if there were a law which can touchable in a sense that if the company is not complying, then the registration of that company can be suspended or can be cancelled. That will assist the whole process. Now, this effect, the non-compliance affect the livelihood of the security guard. Because now employees are having the expectation that the government say that or set up a national minimum wage for us at least to get better. But now the same employers who are supposed to comply, they are not doing it, which means that the livelihood of the employee is not, there's no improvement. And much of the companies also, we are talking about national minimum wage, but we are also talking about salary. We are having companies who are still holding the salary of the employees regardless of whatever the client pay. And in the security sector now, what is happening is that the client who are the service provider, they're supposed also to monitor the contract because they have contractual obligation with those companies. But we are seeing that some of the service providers, they are also ignorant and they are closing their door toward the employees. I'm giving an example of a recently demonstration we had at University of Namibia, Ogongo campus with Shilimela Security, where the client indicate they paid Shilimela the back pay, they adjust the wage, the invoice for Shilimela, but the employees, they come to the service provider and said, look, we are employed here, we are not being paid our minimum wage, did not being paid our back pay. But the same university, they are closing their door, which means much of the institutions, they don't want to hold accountable the contractor, they don't want to monitor the security enterprises, whether the money which they are paying this specific company is really given to the employees who are supposed to be paid, or are they really complying? Because if they could do such, then definitely they can able to help us halfway. Because now the issues which we have in the non-compliance is that we only left with one option to refer a dispute with the Office of the Labour Commissioner. Then also the Labour Commissioner is having a backlog of a lot of cases piling, and all the cases they are being treated the same, which means employee wait long time for them to get a remedy. To get remedy,
exactly.
Yes.
Now, what steps is the union taking, to address this issue of non-compliance? I know you mentioned earlier, but can you just elaborate a little bit about what is the union doing in terms of just addressing this non-compliance issue with minimum wage laws among security companies?
Yeah. We're left with no other option as the trade unions than when we identify the employers who are not complying with the national minimum wage, we simply refer a dispute with the Office of the Labour Commissioner for conciliation arbitration for us to get a remedy in terms of the arbitration award. But what you are also doing at the other side, especially those who, with the government and parastatal institutions, we also approach those institutions to call to order those contractor, or some of them we even requested that they must just blacklist some of this company, because it doesn't help for these colleagues just to get tender. Then they only look after themselves, but they are forgetting to look after the people who they employed, because the tender was supposed to benefit all the people involved.
Now, in conclusion, Mr. Franz, you talked about political will earlier. And from your opinion, do you believe that the Namibian government is doing enough to enforce the minimum wage laws and protect workers' rights in the security sector?
Yeah, as I said it earlier, that there's no political will. We understand that the government is not doing much, because we learn that much of this security company, they are owned by these politicians, and they do not have a political will to intervene in this issue. Because we talk this for a long time, that let regulate the industry. Security sector fall under the Minister of Safety and Security. But as we are speaking currently now, the Minister of Safety and Security, they only regulate the side of the gun. They only regulate that side. But when it's come to the personnel, the employees, because employees, they're supposed to be trained, employees, they're supposed to have certificate, employees, they're supposed to go to have even PPE. See, the ministry is not looking at that. And when you look to the sector itself, there is a Security Act which was passed by Parliament in 1998. But as we are speaking until now, that act doesn't have a regulation. And this act is the one which is supposed to regulate the security sector, enterprises, because in terms of this act, the board have the right to cancel the certificate of the company which is not complying. Which means, because of this political will that this act is lying for many years, and there's no one who wants to spearhead it for just the regulation. You see, this is the predicament we find ourselves. Until such time, there's a political will to undertake, to enforce, or to have to formulate a regulation to the act, to the Security Act. This industry will not change. Because as we're speaking now, the Minister of Labor, there are a lot of cases, the non-compliance, they outline almost 98% of the security company. They are not complying. But they only simply issue a compliance order. After issuing a compliance order, then what? Nothing. Unless you refer a dispute with the Office of the Labour Commissioner. That take years to be executed because of the cases which are already piling with the Office of the Labour Commissioner. I believe that the government is not doing much. That's why we are saying that there's no political will.